Hello, Gary.
Hey, Guy. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm very excited about today. Obviously, absolute childhood hero of mine because it's someone who, one of the first people where you heard on the radio, where you heard this bass and it sounded amazing and you thought, I could do that.
That's right. And you know, that bass sound from the Stranglers, you know, you can, who was first? Was it him or was it Peter Hook?
It was him. I mean, he was the first one on the radio. Hooky was a different thing. I think it was, Hooky was someone who was kind of finding his way and making something up as he went along. Whereas JJ had that incredibly, it was so assured and, you know, I remember the first thing I heard was Peaches and it was just bang, you know.
And did you ever see the Stranglers?
I did, yeah, I did. I can't remember where.
Yeah, I saw them a couple of times. I do remember seeing them at the Roundhouse. They did a famous sort of stint at the Roundhouse, and quite frightening band.
That was their thing, though, wasn't it?
Anyway, so I'm a bit frightened now, is what I'm trying to say.
And you should be, because he's an 8th Dan, whatever sort of lethal weapon qualified karate guy.
An 8th desperate Dan. I used to be terrified of him as well. Will you hold my hand like a Zoom hand kind of thing as we go into this? Welcome to the Rockonteurs.
Okay, guys, I'm ready.
This was great, guys. It's so great to talk to two guys that have done this.
Well, it's a big tune for sure. I actually wrote that originally for Tina Turner.
Of course, I had gone and found Joni Mitchell down in Florida and brought her back.
You know, what people forget about Bowie is that he was such a kind man.
I've listened to a few of them and they've been really good, man. I'm sitting in the back of the car coming into London. They're brilliant.
Remember me? I'm in a band now. It's called Roxy Music.
You know this thing about the 10,000 hours of experience?
Oh, yeah.
Get good at something. When we recorded Arnold Lane, we'd done about 50 hours.
The Rockonteurs podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt.
Hi, JJ.
Hi, introduce yourselves.
I'm Guy Pratt.
No, we've met many years ago.
We must have met because, of course, we both have a very long association with the Good Days, with Mark and the family.
That's right. I met you outside the East-West ones.
Oh, well remembered.
I'm Gary. We've never met, JJ, I don't think.
Hi, Gary. Yes, we have.
When? Where?
Your band were playing a CBS thing.
In the 80s?
It would have been the 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
Terrifying memory you have there, JJ.
Yeah, no, I've done everything possible to eradicate it, and it's still there.
We share the same PR because you're at Alan Edwards.
That's right. Right now, yeah.
Alan's just been working on my project, and we go back a long way. But I did notice that Alan's name actually popped up. We'll talk about it later on some mad trip to Amsterdam. You once said.
Yeah.
But we'll get there because that's right at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, it's on late 77. Yeah.
So first of all, we just our sympathies and condolences to. About Dave and to his family and to you guys.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but we got on so well, the whole band, for many years, and Dave and I go back 45 years, so it's as colleague and friend, and then we even lived at my house for 9 months until I told him to fuck off. But he was a very special guy.
Yeah, well, you did an album together, didn't you? You did the Fire and Water.
Yeah, we did. Well, we did.
I did various.
All the other things.
Yeah.
We did. He was. You'd call. I think in the old days you'd call them eccentric, and now you'd say autistic. So he was really high functioning autist, and so if you asked him a question, he wouldn't have the filters to realise that an hour later your eyes are glazed over because he was answering the question properly.
He was arpeggiatingly autistic, I think you might call him. But obviously, taken by COVID, we speak to everyone we've had on in the last year. One of the first few things we talk about is how things have been for them. And I have to say, you're the first time that we've spoken to any musician where it's hit them personally and taken away a member of their band, and such an important member of the band. But there is a legacy, isn't there? Because you'd already recorded some of the records.
Yeah, we'd recorded 90% of this record before the lockdown, and then he got taken ill. But he had, I know it's a cliche now, but he did have underlying health problems.
And how is the record? What are you excited about this? We haven't, Guy and I haven't had the opportunity.
No, we haven't. No.
Well, I've heard a couple of the tracks, including that mad Stuart Pearce.
I was going to ask you,
have you seen it, Guy?
No, I'm sorry.
they've got Stuart. I take it. It's Baz's singing on it. Is it
on the recording? Yeah, but
there's Stuart Pearce, the famous England footballer, with all his angst and anger, a famous Stranglers fan, marching towards the camera intimidatingly, miming to the track. It's brilliant.
Yeah, he's he was well directed, I'm sure. He's basically an old mate, and I was thinking whether it should be Stuart or Eric Cantona.
Oh, yes. Do you know him?
No, but I was meant to. He's preparing an album at the moment, and he lives in Lisbon. So I was invited to Lisbon so I could work with him. And it was just too much of a faff from where I live, which is just, 40 minutes from Nice to get to Lisbon. It was, it was right in the middle of the lockdown. And so I turned him down. So when I mentioned that would he consider, a role in this video, he turned me down. And of course, it was obvious that it should be Stuart and not Eric.
I love that you call him Eric, which of course you can because you're French. So
I am French, yeah. I think the giveaway is in the name.
Just tell us about how that album, this album, has developed then for you, especially obviously with Dave going in the middle of it.
Well, we started writing it 9 years ago. The opening track is a track called Water, which is about the Arab Spring. Water is a metaphor for freedom and democracy. But so we started that 9 years ago. But because, you're a musician and you've got demand, if there's, people really want to see you and pay money to see you, that's what you live for. So for the 9 years following writing the first track, we've been busy, and I've got about 350 ideas, but not one of them able to be completed until we could collect our thoughts and get together. So then the opportunity came. But so he was with us for 90% of the recordings, and of course there's a track which is dedicated to him, which there's no keyboard on it, obviously.
But how did you finish the?
Well, we do have the technology now. So I found in my little village in Provence, I found a studio, a geek with a studio, did a few vocals there, sent them to our studio in the West Country. They were either approved or I was told to reconsider them, and we finished it that way. I mean, all the instrumental parts were done.
On behalf of myself and a whole generation of bass players, just got to say that the first time I heard, when you appeared with the Stranglers, it was seismic, just absolutely seismic. The idea was with you and Simo. With Simo, it was the look. It was the idea that the coolest guy in the band could be the bass player. We'd never seen that. And with you, it was the look and that sound, which was, I remember the first time I heard Peaches. I remember where I was. I remember everything. It was like, it's such a game changer, especially because I remember hearing it and thinking, I could play that.
The guy to remember where he was at any given time was, in those days, was pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, what is the secret? Come on, let it out.
Well, Peaches was a complete fluke and accident because our first record company was called Safari Records, and it was a reggae label based in Chiswick. They never did anything for us, but one day the boss, Reg McLean, I think he was called, he phoned us up and said, "Look, I need." You've got a little PA, haven't you? We had a little 500, 600 watt H&H piled up PA. And he said, could you help augment another PA on the weekend? And we said, yeah, sure. Making 20 quid. So Hugh and I turned up, and it was something called a sound system. I've never encountered it.
Right.
And it was all bass speakers all around this hall in Acton. And suddenly realised Hugh and I were the only white people there, and so we stuck our PA, attached it to their PA, and they had they were sort of scat singing, toasting, and with delays, WEM copycat delays, which make a snare go. And anyway, at one point, once we'd installed our PA with theirs, connected it to theirs. They had a spliff. They were passing this big spliff, And Hugh and I sort of went in the queues, hoping, and the spliff just went right past our face. He ignored us totally, but we made 20 quid from it anyway. But anyway, I heard all this bass and a bit of drums and delays, and I thought, this is fantastic. So the next day, I just came out with those 3 notes, because I'd heard that all night long,
Oh, right.
This sound system.
Wasn't there something about your sound that was akin to Dave Davis?
Well,
sorry, Guy.
Because I was about to say something. Because a few years ago, I played on a track for They Might Be Giants. It's called "I've Got a Fang," and it was Langer and Winstanley were producing.
Oh, right.
And the guy said to me, "Would be really great if we could get like a Stranglers JJ Burnel sound." And Alan Winstanley said, well, for that, we need to get a high watt and we need to slash the speaker cones. And they said, really, you sure that's how they did it? He said, I engineered it.
He did. He engineered the first few albums with
Martin
Rushton. Yeah,
that's right. Well, Ian, we went back some time with Ian when we were trying to do demos way back in 1974, 75. We found his studio, TW Studios in Fulham Palace Road, and he was the engineer there. So we kept in touch with him.
How did the Slash come about? That's what I'm interested in. I want to picture the Slash, because there seems to be a fight between Ray and Dave Davis about who actually did that and how.
And if it was knitting needles or razor blades, they used to slash the cones.
Well, it wasn't done on purpose. It was we didn't know anything about it until we'd done half the sessions for those first few albums, because we did Rattus, Norvegicus, and No More Heroes in the same session, because like any young band, you start out and you're accumulating material, so you haven't had a chance to record it. So we had 2 albums worth of material when we signed up eventually. So we, after halfway through the sessions, we were listening to the sound, and Martin was quite excited about the sound. But one of our crew sort of stripped the speakers because there was something not right, and found there was a slash in the speaker. So it wasn't done on purpose to get the sound. It was an accident.
You're talking about being back in 74, because what's extraordinary is you started and you were kind of, you're obviously up the more aggressive end of the pub rock movement, and yet that seamlessly flowed into punk.
Yeah, the only circuit in those days was the pub rock.
Yeah,
that was the bass circuit, and obviously that's what it's been a great loss actually to British musicians not to have that, to develop their skill, and also to be able to front a band.
That's how I started doing pub rocks in the early 70s.
It was a fantastic circuit, and then the next level up was the college circuit, if you could break into that. So we were playing, trying to play the pubs, although we had such shit equipment. It was always packing up on us, and we were getting asked to leave pubs by landlords. One time the publican really didn't want us on, so he switched our power off. We put the plug back in. He switched it off. We put it back in. He called the police, and that was entertaining to the punters. There was about seeing this standoff. We phoned up again, the pub, and it was a bit like, what kinds of music do you play? Country or Western?
Both kinds. Yeah,
both kinds. Country. So we changed our name. So we were changing our name on a regular basis.
What names? What were some of the names?
Oil and the Slicks, the Shakespearos, loads of different names. Anything but the name that we'd been thrown out of that pub a month previously.
But the Stranglers, did that come as a sort of homage to the scene of what was going on at the time?
No.
Or was that something that happened anyway?
There was a movie with Tony Curtis called The Boston Strangler. And after another disastrous night where people were trying to bottle us off, or we were trying to, we weren't intentionally trying to piss people off, but it was a disastrous night again. And Hugh and I had just gone to see the Boston Strangler, and for some reason I said, the Stranglers had done it again. And we said, well, that's a name. That's a memorable name. That's sort of kind of name which will stick in your throat. And so it stuck. And I think it might have been originally the Guildford Stranglers. And then we just.
Oh, that's right. I think it was. Yeah, I think it wasn't Rich, wasn't it? But unfortunately, yeah, Guildford's a bit too genteel a name, isn't it?
I remember being around at the time in a sort of in a band before whatever the band was that I ended up in, and
spandex.
And the agent, there was this agency called Albion Music.
Oh, yeah.
And if you didn't sign to Albion, you were nobody. They had the pub circuit sewn up.
They did have a bit of they had resident. We were signed up to Albion eventually, and they had the Nashville Rooms, the Red Cow, and they had an inn with the Hope and Anchor. And Di Davis, our manager, who was one of the partners of Albion Music, he had previously been involved with the New York Dolls with Malcolm McLaren.
What was odd about your group, but what I admired, and I came to see you actually. I came to see you at I saw you a couple of times, but I definitely remember the Roundhouse very clearly. One just before Christmas. It could have been November or something, 77.
Yes.
I remember because I love Christmas. I got my first guitar bought for me for Christmas, and I remember Hugh saying something horrid about Christmas on the stage because punks weren't allowed to like it. but what was extraordinary about your group was the musicality, because where you got someone else thrashing away at a guitar, and that was the main part of what punk sound was. You sort of had that role as playing on the eights in the bass, but this great sort of, I'm going to use that word. We use it at least once on every podcast.
Go for it.
Prog style keyboards going on.
Yes.
From day.
Takes cover. Sort
of Rick Wakeman like arpeggios that were everywhere, and it was totally unique and a very kind of.
Well, it was kind of. It's like every time there's a new orthodoxy, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. So it's year zero, and having a keyboard kind of rankled. But plus having a synthesizer in the band was kind of heresy,
Not to mention a beard and a moustache.
That's right. all the ingredients of piss off.
You were skating on thin ice, mate.
Yeah, but you know what? I can skate on thin ice, and no one was going to bother me.
Didn't you open for the Ramones at the sort of Seminal Roundhouse gig?
First of all, in '76, for some reason, when Patti Smith first came to Europe and to the UK, we were chosen it was selected to be what you call the support act. So we played with Patti Smith a few times, and then they were celebrating the American bicentenary from when independence from England, and 1776 to because that was the Boston Tea Party, wasn't it? And to 1976.
Yeah, I remember it.
There were three cities represented, and I think it was a marketing ploy because they top of the bill with the Flaming Groovies representing San Francisco, and San Francisco didn't fucking exist in 1770. It was like a village, a little Hispanic village.
I'll take your word for that.
And
they hadn't got that far.
No, they had not. And then representing New York with the Ramones, second on the bill, and bottom of the bill representing London. The Paul Cousins were the Stranglers.
That's so you were literally flying the flag. That's such a weird thing for a load of punks to be involved in an incredibly nationalistic kind of. Yeah, so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's worth unpacking is the fact that I mean, now I know more about music. I didn't probably get it then, but what I associate you guys closer with was more of the East Coast New York punk sound.
Yeah.
And even before that, garage sound. There's because you can hear, bands like Music Machine and Question Mark and the Mysterians and stuff like that inside your music. Well, but it was more like a Tom Verlaine, Richard Hell kind of vibe from Hugh.
Well, I think we came from 4 different backgrounds at the time. Jet was a jazz drummer originally, and so it was quite something to get him to hit the snare on the offbeat a bit harder. And Dave was a prog rocker really. Hugh liked all the Velvet Underground stuff, and Hugh had been a university student visiting, watching Captain Beefheart in Copenhagen because he did his postgraduate stuff in Sweden. So, and me, I was a classical guitarist originally.
That's what I want to talk to you about. Yeah. I mean, how advanced as a classical guitarist were you?
I only got to grade 6.
because a lot of your stuff, especially on later things, it gets really quite complex, and you can hear bark in it.
Yeah, why not?
Bark cello. Yeah, absolutely.
It adds a bit more to the recipe, you know. And Hugh was much more. Hugh educated me in Beefheart and Velvet Underground and all that kind of stuff. The only sort of bands I'd really heard up till then was. Well, my parents were in the restaurant business. My dad was a French chef. Mum was front of house, and we lived in.
What was the restaurant?
La Chaumière, the Little Thatch in Godalming. I went to school in Guildford, and Godalming is just south of Guildford. And there was a pub there playing blues on a Sunday night called the Gin Mill. It was the Angel Pub in Godalming, and the club was the Gin Mill Club. And I saw bands. You might have heard of them. Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac before they had their first record.
No, never. No, it's not ringing a bell.
They were fantastic. Yeah. And bands like Free before I think they were called Black Cat Bones.
Oh wow!
Wow, I didn't know they were called that.
And
they were a blues band. Were they a blues band?
Yeah. Oh, Free were a blues band. They were just playing the blues circuit. The guys like, have you heard of Ainsley Dunbar?
Yeah, of course.
He played with Bowie as well.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, exactly. And Lou Reed, I think, on Berlin, he does that very long.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, he had a band called Retaliation because he had previously been in John Mayall's Blues Breakers. There was another guy called Keith Hartley's.
Oh, right.
The drummer as well. There were all these bands playing McKenna Mendelssohn Mainline Blues Band, and every Sunday you'd see these bands play. You know, roll up and play in front of about 50 people. And I was 14 or 15. I'd get smuggled in by the older boys who'd let me into the back of the pub, and it was fantastic education.
Because, of course, Hugh's first band was with Richard Thompson.
That's right, at school.
Yeah.
Emil and the Detectives, I think it was called.
Yeah. Oh, good name.
But I can see a connection between those two. There's a sort of wry cynicism about life, a kind of educated side eye that goes on in their lyrics, you know, and in their sensibility to music. How did you end up not being the guitar player though? Was it one of those, oh God, there's already a guitar player, I'm going to have to play the bass?
This is a really boring story.
That's what we thrive on.
Yeah. It's really boring story, so I'll tell you all of it.
Get your pillows ready. My only ambition at the time was to get to Japan and get my black belt.
Yeah.
And I was saving up about £5 a week from a £20 a week wage.
Yeah, Freddie Laker didn't do Tokyo, did he?
No, he did not. And he got nobbled by the Yanks going to New York. Yeah. So I was a member of a karate club in Kingston upon Thames, so I would use my van to go up and down the A3. And one day and I had really short hair, cropped hair in those days, and often got mistaken for a squaddy, because around Guildford you've got Aldershot.
Oh, right.
A lot of squaddies, or a cop, you know, or Dr. Martens and a short cropped hair. And I stopped for a hitchhiker, and this guy had long hair, and I gave him a lift to Guildford. And it turned out he was an American draft dodger who'd gone to Sweden, as a lot of them did. And he'd formed a band in Sweden, which included Hugh, who was doing his research there, this American draft dodger, a Swedish bass player, and had come to England and found a drummer, namely Jet, who'd invited them to stay and live in his off-licence in Guildford. So they were living above this off-licence in Guildford.
Brilliant.
I dropped the hitchhiker off, and he invited me upstairs to meet the rest of the band. So I think they offered me a beer or something. I can't remember. And I must have given my address to Hugh, because 2 weeks later, I never went out. I was just saving my money, playing guitar at home. And someone knocked on my bedsit door. And it was him. It was Hugh. And he looked distraught because he said, Dave, they've all gone. They've left me and gone back to Sweden. They couldn't hack it. I'm left here with this bloke, this drummer. And he saw I had a guitar. So we started chatting, and he said, the bass player's left his bass here. He didn't take it back to Sweden with him. It's a 1964 Fender P, it turned out.
Oh, wow.
My green one. So he said, do you fancy playing with us? So Jet, myself and Hugh started playing. And I turned up after a karate tournament with my hand in a sling. It was quite funny. My first rehearsal with the early Stranglers.
But that's, I mean, God, that isn't boring.
That's a brilliant story.
And it's also the birth of a band that was going to go on and have, I don't know, 10 top 10 records, or whatever you had.
I want to know who the bass player was. Was that like Jonas Hellborg or some legendary Swedish bass player? Went on to join Mahavishnu or,
Yeah.
Jet he's an interesting character, Jet Black, obviously. He's a lot older than you. I mean,
yeah. Had a fleet of ice cream vans.
He had a fleet of ice cream vans. I just love that.
He had a business called the Wine Centre Guildford. He would mail order wine kits, because the British like to make wine from anything but grapes, New Britain.
Oh God, yeah. Leave it in the airing cupboard next to the homebrew lager kit from Boots.
That's right. That's right. And so he had this off license. He had the Wine Centre Guildford, the mail order wine, and he had a couple of ice cream vans, which Hugh, once we moved in with him, we had to service the ice cream loving people of Surrey.
You sold ice cream.
Hugh and I were opening the laps of the ice cream van, which eventually became our transport, actually, and we'd sell ice creams at the Devil's Punch Bowl.
I love the idea of this ice cream van arriving and the music playing on the top, tinkling away. Is get a grip on yourself.
If only.
Yeah. No more 99s.
Rattica is a great album to this day. I mean, it's still one of the most powerful opening albums that I think are banned from that period.
Thank you. I mean, the lucky thing with when you start out, you don't normally get a deal straight away. So you accumulate material and you hone it. You hone it wherever you can. You play it all the time. So when it came to actually recording it, the pieces were in the right arrangements. They were in the right tempos. We could play them blindfold almost. 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah, saying that, but what's extraordinary? I mean, let's stay on Rastas Norvegicas, but rather than having the difficult second album, you did 3. Like within a year.
Well, the first 2 were recorded in the same session because that was the accumulation of material. So it was just arbitrary what was left off Rattus and what was on the next one 6 months later, No More Heroes. And then, the next, that winter, we did an album called Black and White. It was 3 in less than 18 months. Yeah.
How was the writing process on those records?
Well, it was always Hugh and myself. Either I would have an idea or Hugh would have an idea, and we thought up an idea. Another idea was to include the others in everything, royalties wise, because you start out as mates, don't you? There's a dynamic is quite equal, but I've noticed with bands and in the past, one person has a bit more talent for songwriting, so they get the royalties. The dynamic changes, doesn't it? People get a bit jealous or a bit.
You think?
Yeah. I think you might be talking to the right guy here. I spent 6 weeks in court. Yeah.
And so and to avoid that, we made everyone equal, though there were really 2 songwriters. But I always thought as soon as Jet would put his feel on a piece, he had a share of it. So instead of being a multi-millionaire now, I'm just a millionaire because we share. But you share the failures as well together. Everyone's invested much more than if you've got one songwriter who gets the royalties and more attention, and it creates resentment. Over time, it will. But as you well know, Mr. Kemp.
But I just want to jump ahead slightly on stay on that subject. Was that resentment part of the reason that Hugh left in the end?
No, because he wanted a bigger share of stuff. No.
Well, whatever. He wanted more recognition. Let's say.
Well, I think he had the recognition, but I think he listened to sirens. I think when you because he was the front man, he did the talking. He did 2/3 of the lead vocals. And he listened to sirens and things started, he suddenly got his own lawyer. He got a stylist And he was listening to people. I suspect they said, you know, you are the Stranglers and you don't need these others. And, you know, there might be a few persons.
It's you, babe. It's you, babe. You carry them. You carry them. It's you, babe.
So, and, you know, you must have seen Sting had done the thing, and he got a theatre agent. And, you know, so probably thought, you know, Stranglers had come to the end of the road, and I need to move on, you know.
This is the thing, that when you had your first big success, you went and did a little thank you tour of the pubs that you came from.
Yes,
I love that.
Well,
yeah, that's so great.
That was our roots, you know. And it's a shame that circuit hardly exists now.
Yeah, because I mean, so many bands like yourself, like the Police and Jam, and I saw all of them for the first time down at the Hope and Anchor.
Yeah. Hope and Anchor was a great place.
Oh, Hope and Anchor, yeah. No, it's one of those things, isn't it, when you're on that circuit? Because my first band was this sort of mod revival band in '79, and there's that thing of you play the Hope and Anchor and you go, oh my God, we've made it.
You hit the nail on the head there. Yeah. I absolutely remember driving. We were driving our ice cream van after a gig in somewhere in London, and we passed. We drove down Upper Street, and that night we saw Kilburn and the High Roads pushing their equipment out of the beer. The
beer chute. Yeah.
Chute, yeah. And we said, one day that will be us. The Hope and Anchor. It was Mecca.
It really was. It's what we all aimed for. And a little advert in the back of the NME.
If you can see your name printed, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Next to someone you'd heard of, somewhere on the list, like, X-Ray Specs are on the list with us.
I saw Jet was our archivist, and I happened to be looking through some of the early stuff, the press cuttings, and we didn't get any reviews or anything, but we were listed in the Hope and Anchor listings. And one was
right. That was such a thing.
Dire Straits. There's Dire Straits. There's Shaking Stevens and the Sunsets. There's XTC, Rugulator, the Stranglers. Yeah, I mean,
I still have the cuttings of some of those from my old bands and when we were called the Makers originally. But it leads me on to talk to you about the Torrington.
Yeah, the Torrington.
And when you met the Finchley Boys, because the Finchley Boys story, which I did read about yesterday, they're an extraordinary bunch. Can you tell us a bit?
Yeah, well, it was I think summer '76. The whole world seemed to be aware of something happening around, starting in London with the Pistols and lots of other bands. There was a synchronicity. We had. I don't know if by then we'd played with the Ramones yet, but so there was this bunch of kids from North London and a really multi-ethnic group of kids who'd grown up on the estates up there in Finchley. They'd tried out a few bands. I know they jumped up on stage for the Damned, and Damned had run off, and they did the same to us. And unfortunately for them, we never ran off because we were seasoned campaigners by then, And then we started taking the piss out of them. We used to do a song called Tits. Completely politically incorrect now, but I don't care. She's got 36, 24, 36 hips. That was the size of her tits. Boom. Boom, ba-doom, boom, 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 ba-doom, boom, ba-doom, ba-doom, boom, boom. And it was taking the piss out of ourselves.
Yeah.
Cole Porter standard.
Simpler times.
Yeah.
Simpler times. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they decided that we were going to be their band. And suddenly we had our private army. And they'd follow us all over the country initially, and then they started going abroad with us, and there was a hardcore of about 15, but they could muster up about 300 Finchley Boys at one point. They did.
One was called Dagenham Dave, wasn't he?
No, Dagenham Dave was he became a mate of theirs, but he was our very first fan, and he introduced us to all kinds of stuff. Then we were playing at the 100 Club one time, and he came along, and by then the Finchley Boys were installed as our security unit, and he didn't like that, and he attacked them all and got beaten the shit out of. one bloke against I don't know how many Finchley Boys, and he disappeared for a few weeks, and then he reappeared, and they were all matey, and then I think he just committed suicide, dived off London Bridge.
Oh dear!
Really downer part to the story, really.
Yeah. What was so? Yeah. Well, while on the subject of violence, didn't you had a dust up with Seminal? Didn't you? Was that at Dingwalls or was that the?
It was at Dingwalls. Well, it was after one of the Ramones gigs.
And what was that about? It was string gauges you couldn't agree on.
I didn't drink in those days, and after the gig, Dagenham Dave actually had made me drink a few glasses of wine. So I was going through the really crowded. It was packed. Dingwalls, and I passed Paul and Steve and Paul from Pistols and Paul Seminal. They all had a pint there, and just as I walked past Paul Seminal, and we all knew each other, because we were only going frequenting the same places really. He had this tick of spitting. He went just as I walked past, so I took offence and I punched him, and and it spilt the pints of Steve Jones and Paul Cook as well, and so everyone piled in on top of everyone, and of course the bouncers there were huge. So suddenly we found ourselves in the courtyard and facing each other, and suddenly there was a whole line. There was Chrissy Hine, there was the Pistols, some of the Clash,
Celebrity Deathmatch,
and
not the face,
and me and Paul nose to nose, and it was handbags, but and it created a bit of it polarized opinion.
So did you, after a few glasses of wine, did you still have your karate chops?
No.
That's chops, isn't it? Chops, not chops.
Yeah.
I like this. This is that little chapter that we're on is interesting. We'll pursue it further because there's the famous journalist John Savage. He's written.
Oh yes.
And you had a little bit of one with him as well, didn't you, JJ?
Yeah, I can't remember why I was pissed off with him, but I was looking for him, all over London, and I found him at the Red Cow. The Soft Boys were playing. He was in a crowd which included our A&R man Andrew Lauder, who had signed us up.
Oh, right.
Nick
Lowe.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Senior moment there. Nick Lowe, Andrew Riviera, Jake Rivera, and who else? John Savage. And I found him, and someone pointed up to him. So I told him that he was an enemy of my revolution. He slapped me. I chucked a glass of Coca-Cola over him. He tried slapping me, which was an excuse for me to try to bitch slap him a bit more. And then I got thrown out. End of story.
You are the enemy of my revolution.
That's right. That's
But it's the thing
what I said.
But there was so much grief amongst all the punk bands, didn't there? They says that things like when you get involved in serious left-wing politics, there's like the people you hate more than anyone are the other left-wing politics organisations.
Yeah. But continuing this theme, because you were apparently you were banned from London at one point as a band.
Yeah, well,
but also weren't you? But then you were thrown in jail in Nice for a riot.
Yeah. Well, we
come on.
Spent quite a few nights in the cells for one reason or another. But that was a bit of a piss off the Nice thing, especially for Hugh, because he'd just come out of a few months in Pentonville, several months prior to that. And then we got involved in this political thing, which we were
I remember.
unaware of. He got busted at the police roadblock, and I think they found every chemical under the sun on him. So he got busted.
Always the sun.
Yeah.
Oh, I always remember the pictures of him coming out of jail with this sort of very dutiful Hazel O'Connor.
That's right,
wasn't
That's
it?
Right.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, we just got embroiled in this political situation. None of our doing, but we ended up at Nice University and didn't realise that all the students in France were on strike, and it was a glass amphitheatre, and it just kicked off.
Were you held responsible?
Well, according to the French, I was, because the others.
Because you're French.
Yeah, I know. No, the others got just under a year suspended, which meant that when there was an amnesty, occasionally there's an amnesty, it was cleared. But I was given a year and a day, so my amnesty was, I was never arrested.
And I remember getting, was it? It might have been Sounds, or was it NME? That which again didn't seem to be really in keeping with the general tenor. So when you did a nude centerfold.
Yeah, well, we
in an incredibly chintzy room.
Absolutely,
yeah.
But they broke the deal because we were being accused of being sexist, fascist, misogynist, and everythingist at the time. And so they thought it would be a good wheeze for me to send myself up as a male chauvinist, sexist thing. And I agreed on the condition that there was a book, and in the double-page spread of the NME, the book was Women in Modern Society, but it was blurred out. But you can still see.
Oh.
And they gave me the title Stud of the Year, which I was very grateful for.
I think what people sometimes missed, and what I think is in your music, and is there's a sense of humor in, I mentioned irony a while ago, but
yeah,
there is a sense of humor. I mean, just what you were making was social comments as well. But wasn't there some guy used to have Johnny Rubbish brought on in a dustbin?
Yeah.
That sounds hilarious. What is that?
He was a bloke from Finchley, thought he was a stand-up comedian. He released a single, Mud on My Tyre, which was a send-up of Mull of Kintyre. And
he's the new, by the way, he's the new leader of Afghanistan, is he? Mullah
Kintyre. And he thought he would be a stand-up comedian. So we'd bring him on stage at the Roundhouse, for instance, in a dustbin. And it was just as well he came in a dustbin, because he was being spat. I mean, there was spat on so much that he couldn't really come out of the dustbin. So he told us jokes from inside a plastic thing.
But you had strippers as well, didn't you? Was that just one gig? Was that Battersea?
Well, by then, I had a girlfriend who had a flat in Acton, and she shared the flat with a girl called Lynn, who was a stripper. And after accusations of the Stranglers being sexist and chauvinist, it was getting a bit wearing. And Rough Trade, for instance, wouldn't stop the Stranglers because we were chauvinist pigs. So the stripper Lynn, she said, I'm going to show these guys who's in control of their body. So with the release in 1978 of Black and White, she stripped by herself at the Brighton Conference Centre that we played. And then later that year, my girlfriend's sister was 16, who was absolutely stunning. And Lynn got a few work colleagues of hers to strip at Battersea Park. And of course, we were accused of exploiting them, but in fact, they were proving a point that they were in control and not us.
a la Hawkwind, I guess.
Oh yeah, was it Stacey?
I don't know. I remember that it's famous for one of their naked dancers.
Yeah,
probably a little too nuanced for the time. If you'd done that later, because I remember all the shock, outrage headline, and it's very hard to get your statement through all the noise, isn't it?
Yeah, and in fact, I think it was a lot of people didn't rate our music. We were a distraction for what we were producing, the music, I think,
I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier as well about you being a little bit too intelligent at times, a little too musical at times, especially with Dave in the band, yeah. and doing things in 3/4 for Christ's sake.
It's the easiest form for me. I can write anything in 3/4. It's fantastic.
But do you think some of that some of that image that you got tarnished with? And I think there was a sense, a lot of that was given to you because you didn't fit into the whole punk ethos and you were too clever for it in a way. But do you think some of that still stays? Do you think that's hard to shake off?
Yeah, I mean, it's slowly. I mean, far too slowly for my liking. It's shaking off, especially in the UK. Abroad, I think there's a different attitude to the Stranglers, but yeah, it was a bit. Well, in the UK, there's a bit of a suspicion they like the noble savage thing here in the UK. They like you if you're a rocker, you're going to be a rocker and not have intellectual pretensions. Abroad, they think that's art.
Yeah.
But here in the UK, you're either an art house or art band or aggressive. You can't really be the two, but we proved that you can be.
Well, this is a good place to jump onto your album, then, You're a Man Cometh, which is brilliant, which I know, but which has this actually incredibly prescient now, sort of serious political mission statement.
Yeah.
Doesn't it set out about it?
Also, Guy, it's electronica at the way before it was kind of happening. So this is 1978, I think, JJ, and it's this album has always sort of has definitely got a Euro feel to it.
With all the titles, yeah, but it's this idea of embracing a strong Europe, but it's quite funny. All the points you make are even more valid.
Well, I'm still. I can't believe that people. Okay, if you want to divorce, you should have a real reason to divorce. And I still haven't. No one's really. People tell me, taking back control of what?
Yeah, well,
but that's another argument.
That's a whole. Yeah, that's a whole can of worms.
I've obviously. I was born in London. Actually, I was not many.
You're born in Notting Hill, weren't you? I said, proper Colin McInnes, the blue light. Yeah. Notting Hill.
Well, the immigrants came to Notting Hill. There's a lot of immigration in the early 50s, late 40s and early 50s into Notting Hill. And I was born in St. Mary Abbott's Hospital.
Oh, right.
Which is where Jimi Hendrix was.
Jimi Hendrix died, yeah.
Declared dead, anyway, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And Notting Hill also, conveniently for my folks, was close to the French consulate and embassy. So it's a little French district. If you go to the posh part, which
I was going to say, yeah, isn't that it's down? It's the other side of Notting Hill Gate, isn't it? It's down in Kemp.
That's right, yeah. So I was born there, and I always wanted to be English. When you're growing up in England at that time, there aren't any very identifiable strangers or foreigners. So having a French parents made you stand out. And I really didn't want to stand out. Kids can be very cruel, So very early on, I kind of had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, so I was fighting from very early age.
I was going to say, do you think that might have inspired the karate?
Of course.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm really not a stranger to violence, and unfortunately, so I had identity problems, and I thought the idea of a United States of Europe with people, all the nations, the nations of Europe still keep retaining their identities. Look at Scotland. We know who a Scot is. We know where Scotland is. Scots know that they're Scottish. So why the need to break it up even more? It's against nature as well, because it's kind of unnatural for islands to be split.
Yeah.
Just going on to your, I'm sure that you and I we're in agreement. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But but I need to talk about that album now, because it is what is interesting about that album. Your solo album is kind of what we were going to be doing in 2 years later.
Oh right, okay.
The electronic.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So how did that happen, and what did you want?
Well,
who was influencing?
There were. Let's face it. There were influencers way before that. There was the Kraftwerk and all the German bands.
And Bowie had brought along.
Yeah. So I was fascinated by all of that and the new technology. And well, you're from the same generation of musicians, roughly. It was the transition between analog and digital, and then synths, and then they started getting polyphonic, and you could start changing sounds quite. So it was, studios were fascinating at the time. Went from tapes to SSLs in a matter of years, a short few years. So I loved all that stuff, and I just wanted to make a statement about Europe, because I couldn't be 100% French, I couldn't be 100% English. I was a European, and that was sufficient to define me at the time.
What were you listening to then that was kind of inspiring that?
Kraftwerk.
Yeah, because I guess there was John Fox was probably active by then, wasn't he?
Ultravox. I saw one of their. I think I saw one of their first gigs, which was at the Nashville Rooms.
I obviously love Midge, but with John Fox, it was an incredible band. I mean, it was brilliant.
I remember seeing them. I think it was what do you call when you do something for the record company, sort of
showcase.
Showcase. They were doing a showcase at the Nashville Rooms, and I was there because it was my kind of local at the time.
And that's what Billy Currie synth through a fuzz box.
That's right. Yeah. So everyone was starting to discover synths, and a few years later, with the 80s, it was synth-tastic.
Yeah, but you still poshed up. You got that sound of that sophisticated pop sound later. You had your career went rather strangely quiet at one point, at the late 70s, early 80s.
Several times.
suddenly you pop up a few years later with this enormous song.
Which is actually, because the funny thing about Golden Brown is that I assume that's what we're talking about.
Gordon Brown we're talking about.
Gordon Brown.
Yeah, it was a brilliant, and to write that song about monetary policy was incredibly brave. Because then you would think that, and I remember hearing it, and you think, oh wow, there's this whole new Stranglers. But the album actually, it's actually quite a standout song on the album, isn't it? You're still the Stranglers, very much, even though that sounds like I mean, it was fantastic.
It was a proper harpsichord as well, and it's just.
Where'd you rent that from?
I don't know, but we were at the
Morris Blackay had one of them.
Yeah.
At the Manor.
We were at the Manor, yeah.
All right.
And then we thought it was a great track. We really believed in it, and the record company didn't. I mean, the record company had written us off. They told us, I think, one meeting, they said, "Punk's dead, New Wave's dead, and you're gone." And so we insisted. Fortunately, we had retained a clause where we could force them to release a single. And so they released Golden Brown just before Christmas. And in those days, there was a tsunami of releases at Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think they assumed it would drown in the tsunami, and it just carried on. So when it became a worldwide hit, they said, "Oh, can we have another one, please?" So we said, "Fuck off." Gave them a 6-minute song in French.
La Folie.
But really, I mean, did you do that on purpose?
Right.
Was that?
Yeah. Well, they were, and then just as our goodbye, because we had to give them one more single, we gave them a single which they'd rejected only 5 years before, a song called "Strange Little Girl," which we'd done in the very early days of the Stranglers.
Yeah, because that does sound like real Stranglers Mark One. That song, I mean, it's a great song. But...
And they'd rejected it, so we gave it to them as a parting gift.
And then that was a hit.
But the music often was extremely. The music was often extremely left field, wasn't it, JJ? I mean, I remember you see being on Top of the Pops doing that song Harry.
Oh, Don't Bring Harry, yes.
Don't Bring Harry.
It's the most, the completely different feel to anything that you could imagine the Stranglers coming up with.
Well, it's kind of torch song, I mean,
torch song, which is your French background.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
chanteur.
Chanteur.
Je ne regrette Harry.
and all that. Yeah, I love all that stuff. Yeah, I sort of grew up hearing it, so I suppose it's just my DNA.
How do you, you spoke a bit about Hugh leaving, and was that a moment of feeling we can't continue anymore? Did you feel that you were good enough? You were the Stranglers, and that was you didn't need Hugh anymore. How did you all feel?
I thought that was it. Yeah. Jet and Dave, however, thought differently, and they talked me around carrying on. And by then I was starting to write quite a lot more.
But when having been associated with a band in a similar position, when Hugh left, was he leaving on the assumption that he thought that would be the end of it?
He left thinking on the assumption that he would become a big star in his own right, I think.
But he wasn't worried about you carrying on as the Stranglers.
I think he assumed that we wouldn't.
Yeah,
to be honest.
So what was the moment where you went, this is the song, this is something we can do, we can carry on?
I did. Do you remember that scene in Blade Runner when he says
all the scenes in Blade Runner?
Yeah, great. The end when Rutger Hauer is dying, he says, "And it's time to die." He says, "I've seen starships
on the Sennheiser Gate." And,
all these things will be lost, like tears in rain.
Teardrops in rain.
Yeah, and I thought that's.
I only know Shakespeare. Sorry.
Yeah, where you were put.
I only know the Shakespeareos.
And so I did an instrumental with, and I sampled that from Blade Runner. When it came to asking Warners for permission, they wouldn't accord it. So I changed some of the words, and that track, "Time to Die," is on the first record we did post Hugh. I mean, it wasn't a hit, it wasn't a success, but it sort of kind of inspired the band to look elsewhere, to move on.
You had John Ellis come in, didn't you?
I think I'm not sure if that was a mistake or not. But John, I'd happened to see the Vibrators' very first gig at a student sit-in in Hornsey, I think, and I thought they're great. They're great little pop.
I saw them earlier.
Yeah, I thought they're great little sort of punky, fast pop band.
Power pop, wasn't it? Power pop.
Yeah. And John, so I kept in touch with John, and when I did the Euroman tour, I got him as the guitarist. And then I think he was playing for Peter Gabriel for a few years, and he had his ups and downs. But near the end of Hugh's tenure in the band, Hugh didn't want to play guitar, and he had a really particular way of playing guitar. He wasn't a great guitarist, but so creative, really inventive solos and everything. But he wanted to do more singing. So I brought John into the band to do Hugh's guitar parts. And then when Hugh left, John was ready-made guitarist,
because you've been through a few with Paul came in,
Paul Roberts,
and then finally Baz Warren. And really, in your mind, I suppose Baz has been with you longer than
Hugh. Yeah, 22 years coming on. Yeah. It's been lots of ups and lots of downs, more downs than ups. But since Baz came into the band, we reverted to a 4-piece, and I got someone I can actually talk to and bounce off writing-wise, songwriting-wise. So it's been an uphill. We've been going uphill ever since.
We got them. You meant the positively.
Yeah. My English isn't always so good.
I mean, what I love is is your constant ambition to keep this project going, because especially given that you're the last man standing from the original. You're still out there doing the breakfast TV sofas, and still, but this is great. This is what you do. It's who you are. It's what you do for a living.
They keep me fully occupied, the Stranglers. I mean, people have asked me, would I do another solo thing? And I don't have the time. Stranglers take up all my time. If in musical terms, I don't produce anymore. It's the Stranglers. And, when you're on a winning streak, which the Stranglers have been now since Baz came to the band, it's been a real joy. You guys, you're both musicians. What a privilege it is to make a living from what you do.
Absolutely.
And you have a great following as well that are very, loyal to you.
Yeah, well, I think you get the following you deserve.
Are there still some Finchley Boys?
Sorry,
are there still some Finchley Boys?
Yeah, I've been to a few funerals over the last few years, but there's still a few.
The Finchley Boys still turn up, don't they? I saw some photographs.
They do. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And how do you replace Dave?
Well, that's a fascinating question. The Dave had disciples. You know, he had some musicians who really wanted to play like him, and who know all his parts. And there was one I actually encountered in the studio 20 years ago, and he was just, Dave was his god. So for the near future, because we're contractually obliged to do some gigs. I don't know if they'll come off, but if they are, then we'll fulfill those obligations. And I really got no idea what will happen after that. I mean, Baz and I are still writing all the time, so I don't know what is the vehicle for Baz and my songwriting. Probably the Stranglers.
What are the gigs? When are you gigging?
Well, we're meant to be starting in Belgium in November, then Holland, then Scandinavia, Poland, Germany, France, Hungary, Serbia, Italy. Will it happen? I don't know. It's we're getting closer to that time, and things are still a bit up in the air. With the carnage, Brexit hasn't helped with going through borders. So I don't know. And then there's a UK tour next year. I'd hope that I'd like to think we could do something like that. But in the UK now, do you have these vaccination passports?
We don't here. I think they're going to come in. I have to say, I just spent a few days in Paris, and I was really impressed by it, to be honest. Yeah. And I did think it certainly helped me feel.
Well, there was, it's a real French thing. There was a bit of reticence. At one point during the lockdown, there was a restaurateur in Nice who got busted with about 60 customers in his restaurant. Restaurants weren't supposed to open. And he said, c'est mon devoir de désobéir. When he got carted off, it's my duty to disobey. And
very, very French.
There was...
Yeah, but I see a lot of obedience in France, and they're keeping their numbers low.
Well, I like Macron said, it's we don't stay home anymore. You do. We're not staying at home.
The thing was, there was still quite a lot of reticence about the vaccinations and this and that.
And huge protests, of course.
Yeah, there were big protests, anti-vaxxers. But as soon as Macron said, well, you can't go to a restaurant or a cafe without your vaccine passport, suddenly the figures shot up.
Yeah, you can't shrug without a vaccine passport.
You can't. And also, you take a Frenchman away from his food. That's done.
How's Jet doing?
Jet's falling apart. It has been falling apart for 45 years, actually, all the time I've known him. He's fine. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. It was his 83rd or 84th birthday. And I said, how you doing? He said, it's falling apart. But, we have a bit of dark humour in the band. Every time someone dies, a musician dies, he says, outlived him.
Yeah, but he doesn't get behind a drum kit anymore.
No, and to be honest, over the years we've had 8 different drummers filling in when Jet was poorly. He's always had health problems, but one of the most violent men I've ever known. But he's fantastic.
Yeah, I saw a clip of him on breakfast TV once, and he looked like he was very cold. He was wearing about 4 coats.
Yeah,
what a character! What a character!
A big coat. Yeah.
So good luck with Dark Matters.
Thank you very much. Yeah, nice talking to you guys.
No, it was really nice to talk to you, JJ. It was fantastic. And
may I ask one question? I think of each of you. What are you doing these days?
I'm basically doing this. I'm doing odd bits of bass playing here and there for people, and we're waiting waiting to start rehearsing because hopefully Gary and I are going out on tour together.
Oh, really?
Next year, yeah, with Nick Mason with The Source for the Secrets.
Okay, so that's answered my question for Gary as well.
Well, we do.
Well, only part of it. Gary's always busy.
We've been doing for about 4 years now. We play early Pink Floyd stuff with Nick Mason.
Right.
So with Nick, and it's called Nick Mason Source Full of Secrets. So it's been doing really well. We had a live album.
It's really good fun.
What, Syd Barrett type material?
Yeah. We do all that.
I had a solo record out.
Right.
That came out just on Columbia just a few weeks ago.
Can I?
Which I did in lockdown.
Can I get a chance?
Which I'm on.
To hear.
Alan's got it.
Okay,
I have it there.
Signed. I've probably got some signed copies.
Great, I can take it to France with me.
You can have a rare unsigned one, Guy.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, the majority are signed, you mean?
Yeah.
JJ, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, nice talking to you. And thanks for. I know you're musicians, but you've been fucking more professional than a lot of journalists.
Oh, thank you very much.
We're fans at the same time.
Yeah.
All the very best. Nice talk.
Yeah, really good talk to you. Cheers, JJ.
Cheers, mate. That was good.
That was really good. A very sort of charming, rolling chat and like an absolute icon for me and any bass player of my generation. So
yeah, and you realise actually thinking about it, I never mentioned it to him, but how influenced someone like Adam Clayton is by
absolutely
style.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And anyway, listen, thank you very much for tuning in today and listening. Again, we are hoping that you can leave some nice reviews, etc.
So keep listening, keep posting, and thanks to Ben, our producer, and it's good night from him.
And it's good night from me.